right. Well, Jenni, it is really wonderful to talk to you today about all the exciting work going on at White Oak Pastures. For those who haven't heard of your family's farm or who haven't had the opportunity to visit, can you just describe White Oak Pastures for us?
Of course. Thank you, Blair, for having me. So my name is Jenni Harris, and I am a member of the fifth generation of White Oak Pastures, which is our farm in Bluffton, Georgia. We are in Early and Clay County. And on our farm, we pasture raise 10 species of livestock. So for the record, that's grass-fed cattle, goats, and sheep. And then pasture raised chickens, turkeys, ducks, geese, guineas, hogs, and rabbits. And we are, we're really focused on the symbiosis that exists between the animals and the benefit that animal impact has with land regeneration. But we also are fiercely proud of our resiliency in the food production system. So in addition to pasture raising those 10 species of livestock, we also process, slaughter, and butcher on the farm as well. In addition to that, we also market and self-distribute to grocery stores like Whole Foods, Publix, and Kroger, but then also to individual consumers through our website, whiteoakpastures.com.
That's great. So your farm and your family is really a leader in the regenerative agriculture space. And I'm wondering if you can kind of walk us through how you guys got there, what your journey was as you explored regenerative ag on your land.
Sure. So you used the word leader, and that was not my word. We were probably one of the first people to take hold of pasture raising livestock and marketing them to consumers who cared a lot about animal welfare, land regeneration, and the rural revival of ghost towns like Bluffton. And we came to that. I mentioned I'm the fifth generation. My sister and I are the fifth generation of Harris's to return back and make a living on the farm. But it's really a great return to the way we once farmed. You know, my great-great-grandfather came to Early County in 1866. My grandfather, it was actually my grandfather, who was born in the 20s, who's responsible for industrializing the farm. And it wasn't because he was a bad person, but that was when chemical fertilizers and combustible engines and other tools that science gave us to make meat production specifically, efficient and more profitable. That's when those things occurred. And he, like everybody else, adapted and adjusted to those mainstream styles of thinking. It wasn't until his grandson, who happens to be my dad, focused on the unintended consequences of industrial agriculture and started to transition to something different. That happened in the mid-90s, before there was really a grass-fed beef became a thing. In fact, the funny story that I tell about that is that our business was built one meatball at a time. My dad spent tireless hours doing demos in grocery stores like Whole Foods and Publix. And in his very thick Southern drawl would say, "Excuse me, ma'am, would you like to try some of my grass-fed beef?" And people would look at him and say, "Try what? What? Try what? What even is that?" And, there was a tremendous amount of education that happened. But that's how far we were from having meat that was a grass-based, product. So fast forward 25 years later, really probably more than that. I've been giving the same talk for a long time, so I probably need to revisit my year spans. But fast forward to today, where we have the opportunity to host lots of those same customers on our farm, either for workshops or overnight lodging in one of our cabins, or for a meal in our restaurant. And so we've gone from, really pulling the curtain with industrial agriculture and consumers not really knowing or caring how their food was produced, to now a uber conscious customer who cares a lot about not only the things that they eat, but the effects on the environment of those things. And that's really important to us.
So, what does regenerative agricultural practices look like on your land? Can you give us some examples?
So if you Google what is regenerative agriculture, you could come up with a lot of definitions. Like everything else, everybody, it means something different to them. And I think that's very special. I don't think we should mainstream that at all. For us, regenerative agriculture is restarting the cycles of nature. So we think through linear production systems break the cycles of nature. Man believes that we can control inputs to maximize outputs. And while that's true, it has a lot of unintended consequences that are on the backs of either the animals themselves, the land, or the consumer. And regenerative agriculture is embracing the cycles of nature, the naturally occurring water cycle, mineral cycle, energy cycle, grazing cycle, carbon cycle, and working with those cycles to produce products that are actually great for the animals, they're great for the land, and they're great for communities like ours who were really, really robbed of people and productivity with the industrialization of agriculture.
So I know you guys have actually done some studies to look at how much carbon is actually being sequestered in the soils at White Oak Pastures. Can you tell me a little bit about those studies and what you have found?
So in 2018, we had a life cycle assessment done on our farm, and it was a very expensive process that we did not pay for. We were and are a customer of Epic Provisions, which is a subsidiary company of General Mills. And Epic, the people that started it are excellent marketers. They, people like me look up to people like them because they really can eloquently and succinctly talk so well about the products that they that they market and the attributes that make them up. So they're really strong. But the General Mills team seemed to really want to validate the claims that the Epic Provisions marketers and founders were saying. So they said, okay, if we're going to say that this product saves the planet, we got to be able to validate it. So they sent some scientists, some soil scientists from Qantas in Minnesota, I believe, here. And they did a series of sampling. We sent, hundreds of records and invoices and, lots of exchanging data. And when it was all said and done, the life cycle assessment said that for every pound of White Oak Pastures beef sold, 3.5 pounds of carbon dioxide equivalent is sequestered, making us a carbon sink, making regenerative agriculture a legitimate option to to reversing climate change and fixing some of this destruction that we have brought upon ourselves.
That's really exciting that you guys had that data. One of the projects that you guys are currently pursuing that I find really exciting is solar grazing. And so I was hoping you could tell us more about this project and maybe explain how you're partnering with the solar industry really near you in your neighborhood.
Absolutely. So inarguably, one of the most exciting things that we have going on at White Oak Pastures is our partnership with Silicon Ranch in solar grazing. So my dad learned a couple of years ago that we were going to be neighbors with Silicon Ranch, a solar company in Nashville, Tennessee. And so being the businessman that he is, and also the visionary and really forward-thinking person, he approached them and said, I really do think that if y'all are going to put up panels around our farm, I can manage the vegetation underneath those panels in a far more natural way than you're accustomed. And that made its way to the CEO, who ultimately agreed to meet with my dad. And he, being the same visionary, forward-thinking person that he is, said, all right, let's do it. And so in 2020, April of 2020, I believe, you know how these last 18 months have run together. So I apologize for glaring off into the great abyss. I have no idea when that happened. I think it was April 2020, but at some point in the last couple of years, and it was April, we turned loose a few hundred ewes underneath about 415 acres of solar property, about 6 miles from where I'm sitting. And we have been managing the vegetation underneath those panels ever since. And we believe that it is a true relationship of healthy symbiosis. The panels above are, it is a really powerful way to keep land in agricultural production, produce a product that's healthy and nutritious for consumers, and provide clean electricity. It's a win-win. We honestly have not found a loser in that system yet.
That's great. Well, I want to say we are just so thankful that you've joined the Drawdown Georgia Leadership Council. As you know, Drawdown Georgia highlights solutions in the agricultural space that can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, things like conservation agriculture and silvopasture, which is just the planting of trees on pasture land and farmland. I was hoping you could share your thoughts on the need and the importance of having the agricultural community in the state at this proverbial table during discussions about how to reduce emissions in our state and build resilience to a changing climate.
So that's a pretty hard question for a farmer to answer. We proclaim to be experts in animal welfare and land regeneration and rural revivals of towns like Bluffton. We know how to do that, and we stick to our own space. But I will say that if we believe that we are degrading our resources with food production, then it is incumbent upon us to investigate ways to reverse that. And evidence of that is that the word sustainable really lost traction. 15 years ago, sustainable was the buzzword. It took every ounce of whatever inside of me to not put that on our label, because it was, every customer didn't care about the nuance, but is it sustainable? Is it sustainable? And now fast forwarding, sustainable is no longer enough. We have to regenerate. We're not to a point where if we just sustain what we have, that's going to be all right. It's not going to be all right. We're headed to a very dark, bad place if we don't do more than just okay. And if agriculture contributes to that, then it's incumbent upon us to investigate ways where agriculture does not contribute to that. One system is teeming with life. There's ecological biodiversity. There's production of nutritious things, and right next door there is a desert of erosion, and it's just very obvious. And I'm very grateful that those obvious observations are being made. And I think that agriculture has got to be part of the conversation. I think that there are lots of ways to draw carbon out of the atmosphere and put it back down into the earth, but carbon is just one thing. All of the cycles of nature have to be functioning together. We have to have a clean water system. We have to have, lots of different, cycles working together to create and maintain, life. And so we're just sort of scratching the surface of what all this looks like for us as consumers or us as producers. And I'm very excited to be doing what I'm doing.
Well, before we close, I'm curious if you can talk about just how a changing climate has impacted White Oak Pastures, and if you see any of the practices that you guys have really leaned into helping to build any resilience into some of the changes that you are seeing.
In changing the way we farmed, we've noticed lots of really positive things and some negative things. So we'll go through both of those. The positive things are a real resurgence of things that didn't used to be here during my childhood. So you never ask a woman her age, so I'll just get right to it. I'm 35. And growing up, being born in 1986 and through the 80s and 90s, I never saw on our farm big toady frogs. I don't know what the official name is. Somebody watching this probably is some sort of amphibian biologist and will be able to correct me, but big toads, lightning bugs, dung beetles. Those things never existed here through my childhood. My dad talked about them, but I don't remember them. My son, so my wife and I have a 5-year-old, and his favorite thing is to look for bugs. And we are finding big toady frogs, lightning bugs, and dung beetles on the farm. These are things that, again, I did not have, that my dad used to talk about having when he was growing up, but I never had. And I have to think that is a very positive reflection of life that is occurring here at White Oak Pastures. I mentioned some negative things also. In a natural production system, there is both predator and prey animals. We have found ourselves with the home of 80-something bald eagles, predator species, that have gathered on and around our farm because we raise our livestock outside. And in raising livestock outside, it gives them an opportunity to be predators, and feed in a very natural way. And so I was telling this story yesterday. There was a couple of bald eagles that showed up in October and, of course, left when it got hot. The next year, there were 4 or 5, and they left. And then the next year, there were 8 or 10, and they, migrated. The next year, there were 20 or 30, and then they migrated. And when we got in the 20 and 30, it became a lot less cool. When you woke up and you were drinking your coffee on your front porch before you went into work, there was nothing more refreshing and American than seeing a couple of bald eagles soar over your pastures. That was really cool. But when we got to where there were 20 or 30, the damage that they did to our pastured poultry operations specifically became substantial. But it didn't stop at 20 or 30 or 40. We, in one sitting, counted over 80. One person got 82, the other person got 85. So we just say over 80 bald eagles at one time, which means there's far more than 80 eagles living here. But that's not good for our production system. That's very destructive. But it is evidence, again, that this natural production system exists with predator-prey relationships. Now, we're way out of balance just because it's kind of a bald eagle buffet at dawn and dusk every day. But the evidence is there that those eagles could choose to live anywhere, but they choose to live at White Oak Pastures.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time and for sharing your stories. I know so many of us have a lot to learn from what you're doing at White Oak Pastures. So thank you so much, Jenni.
You're welcome here anytime.
Thank you.